Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the session today. I'm really excited to be here with Sharon and Natasha to talk a little bit about the book Race for Relevance yesterday and our Foresight Works change driver that just came out. And I feel like even if you didn't get a chance to attend the session yesterday, I mean, hopefully everyone did have a chance to attend the Race for Relevance session with Harrison and Mary, who authored the book. And just put out the 10th anniversary edition. But even if you didn't, I think that, we have enough of a recap and we touch on enough of the important points where you won't feel lost, and hopefully you find the session enjoyable and informative. As was said a little bit earlier, we have some engagement questions throughout the session, which I hope will help you think more deeply about the content and help you apply it to your own work. And then most importantly, it's kind of early in the day, so hopefully you don't have too much screen fatigue at this point. I know it could be challenging sitting on call after call, but hopefully having some questions and engagement conversation will help prevent that. So before we go ahead and open it up to the panel, I just wanted to start by kind of recapping the book a little bit and the new driver of change that we have to kind of level set and bring us all on the same page. So authors Mary and Harrison decided to do a 10th anniversary edition of the Race for Relevance books because they felt that the challenges that organizations are facing and also the opportunities the challenges organizations are facing haven't really been eradicated yet, and that the same strategies and opportunities apply. And of course, my understanding is they had agreed to do the 10th edition of the book before everything kind of started with COVID. And so, of course, the book took a much different direction. And I could imagine I myself was writing a report during that time, and is kind of crazy to be doing something like that during such a new time where there's so much uncertainty. So one of the topics they cover in the book is what they really see as relevant or important for CEOs to focus on right now, so that they're prepared for the future. And a couple of topics they cover are making sure that they have the right boards and staff, embracing digital and how important that is for organizations, really how important how much of an indicator or factor it was in how well associations did during the pandemic. So if they were embracing digital prior to the pandemic, they were able to be a little bit more successful or further ahead when everything kind of shut down. Also, they talk a lot about prioritizing innovation, and we're going to talk a little bit of that as well. And then being willing to take risks, which I'm sure all of you know is so important right now, where it's kind of like almost everything we're doing has a little bit of risk to it, because like I said, there's so much uncertainty about the future. So rather than kind of like going through a laundry list of everything they talked about, there was a couple of things that really resonated with me and stood out to me, and I also thought were pretty applicable for the driver of change we're talking about in the session today. So about halfway through the session, Mary said, that innovation requires us to dance with uncertainty. And I just thought she articulated that so well. Like that's just such a great statement. And I really think that it's, it makes you really think about the fact that it's kind of an art. Like it's not always necessarily a clear science of what innovation looks like. And you have to be prepared to take risk and to face the uncertainty. She also explains that it would be a travesty if we spend a lot of time and effort trying to go back to normal rather than developing a strategy to harness what we've learned during COVID so that we can be different and stronger going forward. Just last week, I think this maybe resonated with me too, is because last week I had read this article from McKinsey that talked about what employers want for the future of work versus employees, and that there's really this big disconnect, and employers kind of want to get people back to the office because in their mind that would return to a state of normalcy, or you'll be crossing this imaginary finish line, to the end of the pandemic. But employees really aren't in a rush to get back. And the article kind of predicted or projected that if employers do bring staff back too quickly, that the disconnect between employer and employee is actually going to increase, because really the pandemic's not over and employees are still facing the same concerns, and it kind of can add stress or a feeling that employers don't really understand their employees. So even though it was specific to working in a hybrid workplace or back to work, the article kind of brings out so many of the points that the authors of the book talked about, and also that we're going to talk about today. And that really is focusing on the future and having a culture of foresight so that we don't miss opportunities to to change and have a different role in the role that we want to have in the future. And so I think that brings us all to Foresight Works. So just a little bit about Foresight Works. As Andrea indicated, I'm the chair of the Foresight Works advisory group, and the Foresight Works tool, if you're not familiar, helps associations to plan for the future and envision different scenarios by identifying what they call 50 relevant or timely drivers of change in the world. So there's 50 drivers, and they're categorized into like about 6 categories, and each driver has what we call a brief, and it talks about, you know, what is the trend or the driver, what is the implication, what are the uncertainties, and I think most importantly, what can this mean for associations? So the briefs for these drivers are really informative, and I think really useful to help think about different scenarios. And Foresight Works is really unique to a lot of products that are out there because it is research-based and it's continuously updated. So we're always rolling new drivers out and sunsetting old drivers. And the new driver, one of the 5 new drivers that's being rolled out this month is a world reshaped by COVID, which we'll be talking a little bit about today. So before we go ahead and get started with the panelists, like I said, we were going to have some questions to kind of get everyone thinking, get everyone engaged. I know everyone misses the intimacy and the interactions from when we're in person. So we thought we'd try kind of a couple questions to get you thinking. So the idea is that really you could reflect on the answers to these questions privately, jotting answers down or typing it, whatever you want to do, or you could share them in the chat. And we're going to have about 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how we do on time at the end, to share some of the answers to the questions and have some conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce 2 questions and give you a little bit of time to answer those, like 20 or 30 seconds, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to panelists. So the first question is, what is most relevant or top of mind for association professionals now and leading into the future? So what are some of the most relevant or top of mind, things your association's thinking about or griping with, or opportunities? So go ahead and take a couple seconds, like I said, to answer that on your own, or go ahead and put it in the chat. I'm just going to grab my phone to kind of keep an eye on time. Oh, and the question just popped up in the chat window in case you didn't see it. And again, don't feel the pressure to answer this in front of everyone if you're not comfortable. Thanks, Larry. I see some answers coming in now. And the next question that we're going to pose to everyone is, what capabilities does your organization need to acquire to be more innovative? So what capabilities would help your organization be more innovative? If you want to put that one in the chat window as well, Andrea, that might be helpful. Thanks. So we see some answers rolling in related to navigating meetings in the future of virtual, how we deliver content and value, for how do we be more innovative. It's how do we continue our mission and strategy with a membership on COVID frontline and staff burning out. That's a good one. Looking at programs we can sunset. That's, I feel like, always coming up. Or this might perhaps be the best time to start thinking about that. Better technology and data. And innovation skills. So feel free throughout the presentation to continue to post your answers in that window as as maybe you think about more things or reactions you might have to the panelists, because I'm going to go ahead now and open it up to them. So the first topic the panelists were going to speak on today was embracing foresight. So how do organizations embrace foresight, and how can they be successful? Kind of the theme I think around this is the approach being more of a marathon rather than a sprint. So Natasha, do you want to kind of go ahead and kick off that conversation?
Sure. And I want to say, thank you for this opportunity for me to be here today. I do want to mention that Harrison and Mary's session was right on point. Many of the things that they discussed were thoughts that I know Sharon and I have been feeling for a long time. So it was very insightful and resonated with us a lot. And I mean, right now, it's important for us to bring innovation into our organizations. As we know, associations have been notoriously slow in those categories, whether it be in, creating something new, our governance model, DE&I, and so many other things. In order for us to see change, there must be disruption. And that is just exactly what the pandemic has brought. Mary mentioned that if association wants to thrive rather than survive, they have to embrace innovation, and we have to bring in that foresight into our organization. It's important for us to see what's coming up. A lot of times we focus so much on the present that we don't, see that those red flags or things that are on the radar that we need to pay attention to. And with that, when we have these discussions with our boards, with our leadership, it requires us to be risk takers, be bold about our decisions, and not be afraid to try something new. And that requires the right board, that requires the right leadership and empowered employees. We have to be flexible with our members and staff. We have to be open to hear what they have to say. This economy is becoming more competitive. There's many political influences and things that are affecting our members and bringing more challenges to them. And then also our employees are not, no longer in the office setting. So, we just have to make sure that we're being innovative and that we're being insightful and having these things and paying attention to things on the radar and not just having these conversations once a year, but making it a regular occurrence.
Sorry, I accidentally hit mute. Thanks so much, Natasha. Sharon, did you want to add to that?
I do. With NSH, we've taken the Foresight Works and we've added them into our scenario planning process. So to use Foresight and to help a board who has a habit, they're scientists, they look at what's directly in front of them. So we have to provide them an environment to look forward. We've taken the strategic drivers and we've used them to create scenarios. So one of the processes that we use is to have the leadership pick their top 5 strategic drivers, and then we break them into smaller groups and they use 3 of the drivers to create a likely scenario, and then we come together and create an overall likely scenario. Once we have that scenario completed, then what we do is we take that to stress test our strategic plan. Like many of you, in terms of foresight, our strategic plan is a framework. It is not a this objective, that objective, and the other objective. The other thing that we do, which I think is critical, and it goes back to what Natasha is saying and back to the book, and that is we use horizons thinking. So we have that first horizon where we're taking care of today's business. And then we have that second horizon where we're looking at 3 to 5 years, and then the third horizon beyond. The reason we're looking at those horizons is going back to the consolidation of resources. That's one of the things that Harrison and Mary talk about, is to concentrate your resources. And if you're spread too thin, you can't do that. So we know that we are investing in today, tomorrow, and in the future, but using the ASAE Foundation's research is critical. And ironically, or maybe using our own foresight, we are currently reading The Race for Relevance with the board so that I can get these scientific minds to start thinking ahead and understand that the work we are doing is a very long marathon and we need to be working in a series of sprints. And Mary, I think, just saw in her chat, she talked about the piloting and trying different things. I'm a firm believer in failing forward. So it's okay if not everything succeeds, but we have to try different things and we have to have multiple irons in the fire at the same time so we can pull them out at different times as the environment changes.
Thanks, Sharon. Natasha, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Sharon hit it all.
Sharon, one question I have for you is, do you have any advice for people on how to kind of start to get your boards to think about failing forward? I love that expression, but I imagine that it's not something that's easy to do.
It's not easy to do. It actually builds on the session that we just did, which is the CEO Real Talk, and then, for first-time CEOs. You need to set up series of quick wins because it's about trust, right? If your board trusts you and they've said, these are the resources we are going to give you as a chief staff executive, so I'm going to speak from my role, our job is to give them the information that they need to help them make decisions and to educate that not everything is going to work. So when something doesn't work, then we have a conversation about this is what went well and why. This is what did not go well and why. And this is exactly how we're going to move forward and what we've learned from it. So it takes building those quick wins. It takes giving information, being honest and authentic in your communication, and having conversations with clarity about roles and responsibilities. Who's going to do what does success look like? And if we start seeing that we're slipping, let's have a conversation.
And Leslie, Sharon sparked a point that I wanted to bring up. It's also important to have the right people in the room. And sometimes it's just the board and leadership. And we sometimes forget our staff, members, and also other important stakeholders who may have the information we need to effectively plan and move forward. And many times, those people get left out. So I think it's important to also make sure everyone, organizational wide, internally, externally, is involved in the discussions as well.
I see. I think that was one of the points that the authors made yesterday about having the right boards, having the right people on your board for what you want to accomplish. And also, I was so happy to hear them add in, how important staff is. And I see that someone just commented in the chat. I think Larry Sloan said, and inviting guests at the board meeting can help, and that's something that that IEEE leverages. Trying to get consultants and people who are really specialized in certain areas. One thing that when Sharon, Natasha, and I talked when we were planning for the session was, thinking about thinking about the different horizons that you mentioned, Sharon. Like, what are we doing now? But how do we plan for 3 years out and then even further out? So it's how one of the introspective questions that we came up with. How do you maintain member-centric value proposition? While also thinking about the future. So I think so it could be specific to be saying member-centric, but like it also makes me think about how do you be successful in the Horizon Fund while also finding the resources and tools to plan for Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. So that brings us to our third introspective question for the attendees is, how do you maintain a member-centric value proposition? So I want to take a couple seconds to jot that down again, either in the chat window or on your own. We'll go ahead and Andrew, thank you, Andrew. Andrew just posted it there in case you need the question. And Sharon, I believe this was an area that you had some experience in. So do you want to go ahead and share your opinion here?
Certainly. So it's really easy for us to get caught up with what we think we should be doing. I want to go back to some other ASAE research, and that's the decision to join. And one of the key learnings in decision to join is that because a board has much more access to information than the rank and file members, there can be a disconnect on what the members think they want versus what the leadership thinks the members want. So for us, it was really about engaging the membership. We started this process some time ago with our work with Avenue M for our new membership model. So what we decided to do is look at this from our members' point of view. And one of the things that we learned is most of our members will never, ever be able to attend an ASAE, I've got ASAE on the brain, to attend an NSH annual meeting, and how we share those resources. So for NSH, we decided to become digital first to meet our members where they reside, so that they can do their work on their cell phone, they can get their CE, and that they can access us whether or not they can come to an in-person event. We've taken that further in that we are going to look at this from the point of view of our members, and we're creating personas. So we have different verticals within Histotechnology. I seem to have an affinity for picking associations that are a mile wide and an inch deep, meaning that there's lots of different subspecialties even within the group. So we're creating personas, and from our members' point of view, I had my entire staff go through a process of creating a spreadsheet and saying, what are the pain points? What do we have that solves their pain point? And so our communications are increasingly coming out as from the members' point of view, from solving their pain points, and then going back to, I think it's a blue water strategy of being somewhere where everybody's not. We have a lot of competitors in our space, so we are having more and more conversations about what our distinctive competencies are that will solve the pain points from our members' perspective, which will in turn drive the economic engine, which fuels the mission and the vision of the organization.
Thanks. I see some people reacting to a lot of what you said in the chat. One thing that someone mentioned is that your boards don't always necessarily, know what membership wants. And one thing that IEEE does every year is actually provide the board with the demographic breakdown of them compared to the averages of our members. So, the gender makeup and educational achievement and where they reside, and I think like what their kind of interactions and touch points are with the organization, so that the board kind of has, year over year is reminded that they're not necessarily, while they are aimed to be representative, in a lot of ways, they're not really representing our general membership. So I think that, that was a point that people seem to identify with looking at the chat. Natasha, did you want to add anything?
Yeah.
Member value proposition?
Sure. And I think sometimes this is kind of like the unspoken thing is we have to look inside at what we're doing internally. I think associations can do a much better job at collaboration internally. I know some of you may work in departments where you're working in silos, and you can't truly transform into a high performing organization and offer the wonderful benefits you have for your members if you're working out of alignment. So it's important that we work together and make it make sense and not have such a disconnected strategy that can cause confusion with our members. Another thing I wanted to mention is to be member centric, we have to think about DE&I. Innovative culture is a diverse culture. So we want to make sure that we're putting those principles up front and making sure that our members feel included. So I work for a global trade association, and our members are all around the world. And it's easy to kind of lead with a US centric mindset because we're based in DC, but it's important to kind of step outside of that and not have a, it's, them rather than us mindset, but kind of just make everyone feel heard and embraced and take in different perspectives. And then also, I think it's very important, and I just talk about this all the time, is creating a culture of entrepreneurs. So everyone knows what an entrepreneur is. That's, someone who, brings new ideas to their business, but we can be entrepreneurs and bring new ideas to better help our members. So, some of these ideas might be non-traditional or outside the box, but if it's, something that can help our members, like as leaders, we should listen to that and we should hear that. So I think it's important for us to internally bring in those principles of making sure that our staff is playing a role in reaching out to our members, and we're creating a space where benefits are accessible, no matter if they live in the US or somewhere else. I think all those things play in the line for a member-centric value proposition.
Thanks, Natasha. Sharon, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think Natasha hit it on the nail. The idea of working collaboratively, even in a small staff association, we have silos. We get so busy doing our work. I'm a department of one, and it's very easy to get caught up into it. So the diversity, equity, inclusion, and access piece is important within the staff, and most important within the membership. So it just makes good business sense.
That's fascinating, coming from such a large association where we have over 1,000 people on staff. I never really thought about the fact that silos might also be present in small organizations, but that makes total sense. And the thoughts on diversity and being able to collaborate, I think, are all spot on and being echoed in the comments in the chat. So when we had met to talk about this session and we're thinking about the future, the other topic that came up, which we already touched on a little bit, I think you can go in more depth on, is having the right people. And I think talking about that a little more specifically means, how do we get the right leaders? And associations in general, as most of us, I think, already know, like, people tend to just fall into association work. So I guess the question for you both is, how can associations do a better job advancing the leaders of tomorrow, and being a place that brings in the right people? Like, and are there specific strategies that you've been successful with, or specific things you've read, or whatever you might have to share on this topic? Sharon, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I literally just finished a session here as part of the annual meeting, CEO Real Talk, how to survive and thrive in year one. So I think, regardless of where we reside in our careers or what we're doing, it's incumbent upon us to sponsor, not mentor, but sponsor other people and lift them up. So my dear friend, Dresden Theron, she went from membership and components into a CEO position, and just being there to help her, making sure, like, inviting her into the position, so to present with me, to help her get out forward, to share our mistakes. One of the things I talked about in my fellows application is, what I am absolutely passionate about is helping others, if they want it, to ascend to the chief staff executive role. And so that I can share lessons learned or connect them with other people who have different lessons learned, so that they can do better and succeed and fail forward fast. I believe profoundly in failing forward. I believe profoundly in sharing those experiences and failing forward, and sponsoring other people who may not look like me to help them succeed. Natasha?
Yes, and this is one of my favorite topics. So I'm glad we have the opportunity to answer this question. But I mean, it's just important for leaders to make the space for the next cohort of leaders that are coming up in the association space. You can no longer tell, your young professionals in your office to wait their turn, because they will go somewhere else if you do that. It's important that we, foster great relationships with this new cohort that's coming up in the industry. They are our future, and we have to give them the opportunity to make an impact. I mean, just from my personal experience, there has been plenty of times where I felt, that I was being held back because, someone might not have thought I was ready, or just didn't have enough experience to do a certain job. And it's just like, the only way I'm going to get that experience if I get the opportunity to do so. So it's important for us to take a chance on these new leaders, welcome their ideas, and just put them in the room, whether it's in the boardroom or some other type of, executive leadership meeting. It's also important to be flexible. Flexibility in the workplace. And of course, we've seen this, following the pandemic, that it's truly important. There's a new concept going around called the Great Resignation, where you might be seeing this in your organization where a lot of people are leaving because they want to work on their own terms. And if your association is not going to offer them that opportunity to do that, they're going to find that somewhere else. So we want to make sure that we retain the great talent we have in our industry by, being more flexible, making those adjustments so, our employees can feel empowered, they feel autonomous, and that they can do their job with trust. So I think those are kind of the, some of the important things that we need to make sure that we put into place to keep our association leaders.
And Natasha, I think also like what we've just both talked about, we need to help our leaders do the same things that we're talking about. So not just our association staff, but we need to model the way. So the Leadership Challenge is a book that I love for leadership, and it talks about challenging the process, enabling the heart, and modeling the way. So I think all of those come into play, and we need to model the way as association professionals for our members, and making sure our members are leaving
Yes.
space for new leaders, not young, not old, but new leaders and new
yes.
voices to come into the picture. Natasha, the word that you use, I keyed in on that, new leaders, not young leaders. So I liked that.
But you're talking so much about modeling the way, and I think I've been reading so much about return to office, and so much research on it, and what the right thing to do is, what the wrong thing to do is, and there's so many conflicting opinions out there. And the one thing that I think the one thread that carried through was being a role model during these challenging times for your employees, and for your other stakeholders, and in associations case, that would, one of those stakeholders would be their volunteers and members, and being showing a positive face and being empathetic. And Natasha, you talked about trust. I think now more than ever, having role models in our leaders is important, so that we're not feeling alone, and that we have someone to learn from.
Right. And Leslie, can I just make another point, which is so important? And this is just another one of my kind of personal experience. So in 2020, I had my first child. So just, being pregnant and having a baby during a pandemic was challenging in itself. But when I went back to work, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know, how I would be able to, balance having a new baby and, getting my work done. And I would say that my team was very helpful. They were very supportive during that transition. There were nights when, my baby didn't sleep, and I was like, hey, I just don't feel it today. And my boss would say, hey, take a break, take a nap. That's fine. I know you're going to get your work done. So just having that, trust in your employee that the work's going to get done. It shouldn't matter how you do it, and just being flexible about, we all live a different lifestyle. So it's just very important that to have like a staff that is supportive and encourage you along the way for like big life changes or anything that might happen in your life. So that's important.
Yeah. Natasha, we had the same conversation here early in the pandemic, talking about this flexibility and moving forward in the face of change, is making sure that everybody has that flexibility to do their job, and managing. We're not, results oriented only, but we manage outcomes. We don't manage people. I trust my staff to be adults, and I will treat them as such. And if I do that, I get the best out of them, and then they have the space to do what they need to do, to be present for NSH and to be present for their family.
So we have about 9 minutes left. We had one more introspective question regarding leadership or governance style, but I think for the sake of time, because we have so many really great comments in the chat regarding the topics we talked about, I'm going to go ahead and skip going back to asking a question about scenario planning or leadership style. And Sharon, I know you touched on that pretty well and gave some pretty good specifics already to what's going on in your organization. Natasha, before we move to the next topic, was there anything you wanted to add regarding scenario planning with your leadership or governance?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would say, and sometimes this gets lost as well, is to define your scope. A lot of times we try to, address like so many things at once that it becomes overwhelming for your board and staff. And they're like, well, we don't even want to do this anymore. So make sure to define your scope and do something reasonable when you're planning these different scenarios, just to make it an easier lift, I would say, to push things through.
Sharon, anything finally you wanted to add on that topic?
Nope, I think I said enough on it.
So before we get to the introspective questions, we covered a lot of topics, Natasha and Sharon. I was wondering, what would be the one thing that you think authors, that you think CEOs should focus on in the future? We heard yesterday, and I touched on earlier in this session what Mary and Harrison are saying that CEOs should focus on. But I'm wondering, what, based on your experience, what you think associations should be planning for and CEOs should be focusing on for the future.
I can jump in on that. And I think this is kind of just an overdue thing that we talk about all the time. And I'm sure all of you have been fighting the good fight on this. But I would just say technology, through the pandemic, we were forced to use it and rely on it. However, as I believe Mary mentioned in her discussion, that the earlier adopters of it, found the challenge, not as bad because they were already using remote technology and all the different tools to keep their organization going and reaching out to their members. Digital transformation is not a new thing. This has been going on for a long time. The pandemic just accelerated it. So in order for the industry to remain relevant and to have a sustainable future, we have to invest in technology, and that's software, hardware, and then also the skills of your employee and staff for you to kind of stay on the pulse of what's going on. We can no longer ignore it. So I would say technology.
So for me, I would say that we need to identify our best practices from the past. So what worked well, and then how do we go forward, and what do we need to refine, and what new talents and skills do we need to go forward? So there's no going back. I literally just had this conversation with our Office of the President, and the president-elect said, I can't wait to go back to normal. I said, wait a minute, there is no going back. There is no normal. There is only forging a path forward. We can take some of the best with us and we can bring it with us. And in terms of a CEO, I think we have to become comfortable with ambiguity. So what I mean by that is that the future is not set. And the additional piece of that conversation recently with our leaders was disruption. I truly believe that disruption is going to be the new normal. So in order for us as CEOs to serve our leaders better, it is incumbent upon us to look at the scenarios, look at how we're going to move forward, take the best of the past and move it into the future. NSH decided to become digital first in 2016. We had no idea what that was going to mean in 2020, but my board believes they're brilliant now because we convinced them to go virtual and invest in the infrastructure. So, moving forward, be comfortable with ambiguity and put some structures in place for stability as you move forward. Can't hear you, Lesleigh, dear.
Sorry, I keep getting things, so I keep muting. So I just got the 5-minute warning. Now we're down to about 4 minutes. So are there any questions that anyone wants to put? We were going to say the Q&A, but I think you could just go ahead and put them in the chat because I have that up. So any questions for our panelists today? I'll give you a minute or so. There's so much great language. So Mary Byers says in the chat that pandemic has altered needs skills. So the pandemic, that was I think a great
someone
place.
Put in their pandemic and I'm like, yes.
Yeah, Mary Byers, the pandemic.
I just saw the pandemic. I'm like, I'm going to use that with my Office of the President. They'll get a giggle out of that.
Yeah, and I just want to say this is an ongoing conversation. 90 days from now, we might be in a total different place, whether good or bad. So this is ongoing. So we always need to just have these conversations and continue to discuss, what's on the radar, what's coming up, because things are just changing so rapidly. And as association leaders, we want to be prepared for that.
Yeah, in preparation for this, we had so many, I mean, Natasha and I really, and Leslie really benefited because we had several conversations in preparation for this, and they were all different. Even today was a little bit different, even though we had an outline to follow, and we've learned so much. So keep the conversation going, engage, and be inquisitive and lead with curiosity.
Thank you. I think that's a really great, some really great advice. Before we go, there was one more comment that just I thought was borderline brilliant. Now I can't find it. Oh, it was related to the board and failing. Of just that boards are can be allergic to failing. You know, and I think that makes me think about. I don't know if anyone attended Amanda Ripley's Game Changer session yesterday, where she talked about her book, High Conflict. And it's like such like you're just living in it this time, but you don't necessarily always think about these things. But how conflict really isn't supposed to be a negative thing. Conflict serves a purpose in society, and you know, with conflict comes failing and winning, or you know, coming out on top, and maybe some people coming on the bottom, depending on how well you collaborate or how you define it in your own mind. And that positive conflict is so important, but that we're really living in a state of high conflict, which is much more negative and attacking. I thought her session was really good, and hopefully it's recorded. So if you had a chance, you should check that out too, because it does. I think all the topics we're hearing, even though they're not always necessarily like directly about COVID, it's all about, I think, this environment that COVID's taking place in, but and that associations in the world are operating in. And it's so complicated and frustrating, and I think we're just all doing a really good job moving through it, though. So I don't see any questions that came up in the chat. And then Natasha, do you have any final words, or Sharon, do you have anything else you want to add in the last minute or so before we let everyone go?
The only thing I would say is, you know, keep doing your research, connect with your colleagues on what best practices they're using to, you know, navigate this new environment. Be bold and take risks.
I agree with Natasha. Be bold and take calculated risks. And just thank you for thinking of me and including me on this. I learned so much from Natasha and Leslie in the conversations we had. So it was fantastic.
Yes, thank you so much to everyone for joining over what's probably most people, depending on where you are in the world's lunchtime. We hope you found this session informative, and we'll continue the dialogue with, you know, on Collaborate or at ASAE Annual, wherever you choose to engage.